Hey everybody! Okay, so in today's video, I'm going to revisit a subject I talked about a few videos ago. About the Flying Frenchman, about the French question in Quebec here, and ultimately I want to answer, in my opinion, why Montreal needs to have a French coach and a French GM. It's not that I agree with the reason why, but this is what I think the reason is. And that's all right here at Talking Habs, the home of Habs hockey, where everything is dedicated to the Habs and all things hockey. So if you're a Habs fan like I am, 50 years a Habs fan, and you want to see more videos about different kind of things about Montreal, about the NHL, head down there and subscribe and ring that notification bell. That's going to get you your daily fix of Bleu, Blanc, Rouge right here at Talking Habs. And while you're at it, if you like the video, give a thumbs up. And any comments you may have about my opinion about the reason why we require a French coach and a French GM here in Montreal. I'd like to know what you guys think, whether you agree with me or you have your own opinion about why that is in the comment section down below. Okay, so I'm going to get into this video. Now, I had actually promised, so any of my regular viewers, I had promised this video to come out yesterday or the day before I'm filming it today, and I actually did film it, but I wasn't very happy with it, and I was kind of all over the board. And so what I did was I said, you know, it was late at night, I'm just going to wait and I'll do it in the morning. I'll rewrite my bullet points and get them more in order, and I won't be all over the place. So I sat down to do that this morning of filming, and what I ended up writing was a commentary on the subject of this question for the Montreal Canadiens about why does the coach and the GM have to be French? In that maybe there are times, and there were, where the coach or the GM was a good coach and a good GM and worthy of the job, but there's been many times where that's not the case, and that the only reason that the person is in the job is because he's French. I mean, somewhat qualified, but French, but not the best person available or the best qualified person. So we're going to answer that question. I'm going to read that, and then I'm going to show you what I mean on the board with the GMs and the coaches, and you'll see what I mean about when it stopped. So here's my commentary on the French question of why the coach and GM have to be French. Okay, so it goes back a long way to start. The Flying Frenchman is a nickname for the Montreal Canadiens, we all know. It goes way back to the beginnings of the franchise. But by no means was the team ever, in the history of the team, strictly a team of French-only players or French-only management. Frank Selke took over the team as GM in 1946, taking over from Tommy Gorman, who was GM from 1940 to 1946. He needed to turn the team's fortunes around, and he made plans to make the Canadiens the gold standard in the NHL. But to do that, he needed to increase revenue. They were having money problems, and he renovated the Forum to increase crowd size. And then he played up the Flying Frenchman as the faces of the team to attract local fans and increase team revenues. Now, from my understanding of what that meant was, when there were interviews or, you know, on the radio or pictures, whatever, he pushed the French players that were on the team out to the public and kind of left the English players behind. So that that face of the Flying Frenchman was out there, and that belief that the Habs were really a team of French players was not true. It was strictly a myth. With the revenue, see my categories. With the revenue, the Habs sponsored teams and players from across North America to give the team the largest prospect pool in the NHL and ensure a steady supply of the most talented players in North America, including Quebec. Sorry, that's my old cat. She wants attention. Okay, let's see where I was. Selke understood the value of sponsorship, of scouting, development, and coaching, and that would be the cornerstone of making Montreal the most successful team in the NHL. His work would lead to Montreal's great teams of the 1950s and Montreal's first dynasty of 5 cup wins in a row from 1956 right through to 1960. And they adjusted well in the draft era by replacing Selke with the young new GM Sam Pollock. I don't know how young he was. In 1963, I believe, who was a wizard and visionary with his trades for future picks that led to Montreal's next two dynasties. One of 4 cups in 5 years, which was 1965 and 66, and 1968 and 69, and the 4 in a row from 1976 to 1979. The French rule that everyone talks about, that Montreal had the rights to the first pick of all the French players, came into play only in 1963, and that's because Montreal did have a distinct advantage, but it wasn't an unfair one. So when the draft came into place, the league decided to give Montreal this option because they were losing the most because of their huge prospect pool. And the option was the choice of either picking 2 Quebec-born players before any of the other teams got a chance to pick anybody, or to be a part of the draft, the regular rotation. Montreal opted for this option only twice. The first time was in 1968, where they got Michel Place and Roger Belil. Michel Place, I think I had his hockey stick. It was either Wayne Thomas or Michel Place. I had a game-used hockey stick from one of them. Roger Belil, I don't know who he was. I don't remember him at all. And they did this also in 1969, where they got Reggie Houle and Marc Tardif. Marc Tardif, I don't remember him playing too much here in Montreal, but I do remember he went on to other teams, notably the Nordiques at some point. But they were players that weren't going to change the landscape for the Canadiens. By 1970, the sponsorship system was completely phased out, and the draft system was firmly in place. So the playing field now was totally level. And Sam Pollock went to work. And it became scouting, trading, and draft picks, development, and coaching for Montreal's success going forward. So the myth that Montreal had an unfair advantage is really just that, a myth. So why then does the coach and GM have to be French in order to work here in Montreal? And why is the importance of having French stars, which we all love to have it. We had tons when I was growing up. And they were the face of the team, really. Why is that changed to wanting just our captain to be able to speak French? And it goes back to Saku Koivu, because our former captain Saku Koivu was raked over the coals year in, year out by the French media for his inability to speak French. And I think he could speak a little French, but he couldn't speak it well enough and he didn't want to. And every captain since has made sure to learn at least a few words and phrases just to appease the media. So how many fans really care if the coach is French or the GM is French? And the same with well, I said, okay, I did read it right. So how many fans really care? I don't edit, so you get it wrong. If the coach is French or not, and same with the GM. And conversely, how many fans would like to see a few more local, Quebec-born, whether they're English or French, players be drafted and developed by Montreal? So I say not many to the first question. That's the answer, not many. And I suspect a lot for the last question. Whether you're English or French, I suspect as a fan, you'd like to see some more local talent on the roster. I know I would. And there are players in the queue, that's the QMJHL, worthy of being drafted and developed by Montreal. They're out there and they are worthy. And last year there was one I really liked, Samuel Poulin. He ended up being drafted by the Penguins. And maybe one day we can trade for him, but I really liked him. But there are French players, and it's not to say that they have to draft all French players. And definitely in the first round, you might not be situated where you would get somebody anyway, right? So, but there are, you can make an effort to get more good French players. And there are good French players because other teams have them. And they get them every year, so it's possible. And I would really like to see Montreal have more Quebec players representing Quebec and Montreal. As for coach and GM, that seemed to change somewhere around the early 80s with our last English GM, Irving Grunman, who was a horrible GM, in my opinion. who was here from 1978 to 1983, and our last non-French speaking coach, Bob Barry, in 1981, from 1981 to 1984. It's funny, I rehearsed this, read it over, and this where I'm having trouble with my words, I couldn't get it right in rehearsal. So Barry, a former Hab and native Montrealer, could only speak a little French, but not enough to converse with the media. Apparently, he could speak enough to have a simple conversation, but not enough to speak to the media. So with Serge Savard replacing Grunman as the next GM, and Jacques Lemaire replacing Bob Barry for just, I think, a season and a bit, Montreal never looked back. And the unwritten rule of having a French GM and coach was a thing. So why, though? So in my opinion, this is the reason why I think it happened. With the separatist movement of electing a separatist government in 1976 here in Quebec, but it was on the downswing by the early 80s, right? So I think the Montreal Canadiens, and I think we know the Montreal Canadiens were used as a political pawn, and the French media drove the agenda of the necessity of the Canadiens coach and GM to be French and from Quebec as a sign of Quebec's independence and something that, even though small, that they can hang their hats on. So it's a result of a political agenda gone wrong, in my opinion, and extremely unnecessary in this day and age. I hope the team comes to their senses one day soon. And that's not to say I don't like Marc Bergevin, because I do. And it's not to say I don't like Julien, although I'm not sure Julien is really the right coach exactly for this team. But it's not because I don't like either one, but I say all this. So I hope that one day soon they realize that and they come to their senses and they hire the best coach and the best GM available. French or English shouldn't matter. And I'd like to see them also give the team a bit more of a French flavor. And I think many fans want this. And I think they can do that by finding and developing local quality talent and just leave the coach and GM jobs to the most qualified people. So that's my opinion on that. I want to show you on a board, it won't take long, what I mean by the coach and GM. So be right back. All right, so I realize it's kind of small. I should have written it bigger, but just to quickly go over it. We can go back. We'll go back from Marc Bergevin, and you'll see that they're all French. Marc Bergevin. You can make an argument he wasn't qualified and shouldn't be in the job. Claude Julien, maybe not the actual right coach for the Canadiens, but he's French. Michel Therrien did a decent job with what he had. Maybe not the best coach in the league, but he was French. Pierre Gauthier. Why was Pierre Gauthier ever hired? Horrible, horrible GM. He was French. Jacques Martin. Don't know why Gagné hired him. Gagné, different story. Gagné was a Habs royalty and spoke French. So no problem there. And as a coach, well, Guy Carbonneau qualified. But Guy Carbonneau qualified for me as coach and French, and that's fine with me. Claude Julien, probably too early. He was too young, too new. He was French. Michel Therrien his first time around as well. Same thing. Alain Vigneault. I like Alain Vigneault as a coach right now, but then he was a little young, and I think the reason was because he was French. Mario Tremblay, don't know why. Oh, we'll go to GMs. We'll go back to that. Andre Savard, I have nothing against the guy, but I think the only reason he was hired was because he's French. Reggie Houle, not Habs royalty, but a former Hab. Why was he hired at all? Mario Tremblay, why? Why were they hired for those positions at all? Don't know. But they're French. Serge Savard, you can't argue. Maybe there were years he could have done better, made better, but he won 2 cups, and I think very respectable, definitely qualified. That's fine. Jacques Demers, I think he was the kind of coach that fit a purpose for a short period of time. I have no problem that they hired him, whether he's French or not. Great guy, and he won a cup. Pat Burns probably a little too young at the time, and hired mostly because he's French, I think, and pretty local from Ottawa. Jean Perrin won a cup. Can't argue with that. Jacques Lemaire definitely qualified. I mean, his record proves it out. And it's not that he was young or anything like that. And he came in as a replacement after firing Bob Berry, I think with like 20 games left in the season. So qualified. But then you see, Irving Grundman was there. Sam Pollock wasn't French. Frank Selke wasn't French. Tommy Gorman wasn't French. Behind Berry, you got Claude Ruel, who was there like... he was like the company man. He did whatever they told him. Was qualified, but in more of a development capacity. So I don't know that he should have been coaching at the time, but that was after Bowman left, and they needed a coach, and they were trying to get a 5th cup in a row, and he was the company guy. And he did a good job, but just not good enough. But nothing against Claude Ruel. Boom Boom Geoffrion, I guess Habs royalty, but not qualified. Lasted 30 games, couldn't handle it. The pressure, got ulcers, and had to leave. And then you go, Scotty Bowman, Al McNeil, there were, before that, Toe Blake, Dick Irvin. They were not French, only up here. So I think that's the reason why. I may be babbling a little bit here. This isn't the part I got to sit down and write. But I mean, I think it clearly shows the reason why we require a French coach and a French GM in Montreal is strictly political. It shouldn't be anymore, but it started strictly political, and it's kept going ever since, and there's zero reason for it. And I hope that Jeff Molson one day just wakes up, hires a president, proper hockey president, and that guy just comes in and says, look, that's the guy I want. Doesn't matter what language he speaks. If he's not French, we'll bring in an interpreter. Okay, so that's it for the video. That's my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I really appreciate that. I'd love to hear your opinions. Thumbs up if you like the video. And while you're down there, subscribe. Ring that notifications bell if you haven't already. And that's it. So please, everybody, keep safe. Wash your hands. Stay inside. Do the things we need to do. We'll see you on the other side. See you next video. Peace out, y'all.